But I would first probably ask in a difficult situation, like, what's the most beautiful thing to do here? I used to
Hmm.
maybe ask myself what's true here and what's the lie I'm believing. Like, that's a big thing with, anxiety or
Yeah.
sadness or just even like losing a volleyball game. Like, what's the lie here? Like, the lie is that you're a bad player and you're a bad person for messing up and that you should feel guilty for the rest of the day about it. Like, that's the lie.
Hmm.
The truth is that you did that was just one game, and that if you tried your best and lost, like, you still had success. Like, it's true that I made a lot of mistakes. Like, that, those are very true things. But there's a reason you don't focus on them. It's not because they're false, it's because they're not as beautiful as the other side.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Made to Shine show. I'm so excited because I have been stalking this person for a while now, getting ready for this podcast conversation, and he is a beast on the beach volleyball court. But what I think is so cool about what this guy is doing is, yes, he's a professional beach volleyball player, but he is also shining the light of Jesus in that space. And not only that, but he's a brother, he's a son, he's a friend. He even has that on his Instagram, which I just love because actually I always like try to make a point when I introduce people on the show to call out the fact that they're like a brother or a wife or a mom, because someone like you do so much else other than just a professional sport, which is enough to be doing. So Miles Partain, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. It's awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on and reaching out. So excited to talk.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
excited to have you on. And I was telling you this before, but mission of the show is to remind every single person you have a ministry. Ministry isn't just for preachers or pastors. It's the way you shine God's light in every space that you fill, whether that's your professional sport or your corporate job or high school or middle school. And you're just doing that so well through sports, which can be considered a really secular environment, right? And
Mhm.
so I just think it's such an opportunity. I think about like in Luke 8:16 talks about being like a light that you put on a stand for all to see. And you're doing that. And so I'm so excited to dive into all of that. But first, Miles, we have a tradition on this show, which I'll kick off with you, which is, what is your favorite quote and why?
Um, hmm. There's a lot. Probably, well, I probably should choose something from the Bible, but like a sports one that I like a lot is uh, from John Wooden. I went to UCLA, which doesn't really matter. I would have hopefully found him anyways, but he coached the basketball team at UCLA, and he always defined success as the peace of mind that you did your best. So success is the peace of mind that you did your best to become the best you're capable of becoming. So I like that quote a lot. It's a nice guiding light. It kind of reflects on the theme of God looking at the heart as
Yeah.
opposed to like outward. Um,
Oh, yeah. Like in Psalms when David's like, search my heart,
yeah.
I love that. It's so funny because actually, one of the things I thought was so interesting about you when I was kind of looking up like previous conversations you did, all of that was across the board, people always just commented on you have this like insatiable curiosity for life. And when you're curious about something, you kind of go all in. Like, I think so you started beach volleyball with your brother Marcus, right? When you were younger. And
Mm-hmm.
I was reading something in regards to, he mentioned like, you go all in on things that make you curious. So it's funny you mentioned that, because one of my first questions was like, okay, peace of mind that you did the best that you could. I think sometimes people get so confused on there's so many things they're curious about or so many things they could be doing. They don't go all in on one thing because
Yeah.
they're like, well, I could be doing this thing and I could be doing this thing and I could be doing this thing. And so kind of thinking about that peace of mind of going all in, I think people don't experience that because there's so much. They're like, I could choose, and they kind of get decision paralysis. So kind of taking us back, and I want you to speak to that, but to set that up, taking us back to like when you were younger, started falling in love with beach volleyball, kind of what about that drew you to want to kind of go all in, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah. I'd say curiosity is a big trait of mine, which isn't necessarily always good by any means. But yeah, caused me to go all in, I don't know. I just, for whatever reason, I felt like kind of a mad scientist or a artist in distress a lot. Always trying to like perfect my craft like late into the night. I'm like a night owl. Um, Sort of, unfortunately. I wish I was more of a morning person, but not. So I would spend a lot of time like at nights just like studying beach volleyball and playing like before sunset. We have a small court at our house, so I would hit balls against the wall at our house a lot, and then play like one-on-one volleyball with my brother Marcus. So I've gotten probably the experience as far as reps and games played of like a 28-year-old or 29-year-old player. I feel like maybe even like 35-year-old because I played so much growing up. So
Mm.
even among like some of the professional players, I think I would
Yeah.
still say that. So like having similar reps as they did when they were my age, but like the professional player now at 35, like I feel like I've had the reps of that. So, but I mean that came at a cost. I had a lot less of other things. So if you want to dive all in on something, you get a lot less of other stuff. So you know, but yeah, I like doing things as best as I can. Like success is the peace of mind that you did your best. So winning is not necessarily that, and neither is losing. So
That's
um,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Was beach volleyball, was it one of the was it the only thing of its kind in your life at that age that you felt that pull towards to want to go all in? Or was there like a lot of stuff you were super interested in, but you just
No,
kind of had this special thing with volleyball?
kind of special thing. Yeah, I'm generally like I like to ask why for whatever things, and I can
Mhm.
be a little overbearing on people sometimes, so I need to be careful about that, like asking questions and stuff. But um, yeah, I like to know as much as I can everything. It's not all good. I'm definitely like perfectionist a little bit by nature. Pretty even keeled and quiet, but I definitely like things to be as good as they can. So I like to
Mhm.
do my best with things. Um, which means you can't do a lot of things because it's hard to do a lot of things well. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I'm trying to start like a volleyball teaching business. So like there's a lot of I'm sure you've found this with your podcast. Like there's so much you can optimize and make perfect before actually doing anything.
Yeah. That's true.
Not, not always the best, but I think it scales well to like higher levels if you can have a good foundation. So I
Mm.
you know try and try and do that a lot and get to know. I like to know the foundational building blocks of what I'm doing, and so even with this volleyball thing that I'm trying to do, I have to learn about lighting and microphones, which weren't working before this podcast and all that stuff. But I'm trying to get to the bottom of all of it before I start because I don't want to be using stuff that I don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
which means I don't start for a long time because there's a lot of preparation. So a lot of volleyball stuff is like that. I'm really practice heavy, and games are kind of a quick peek out of my shell, and then I go back in my shell and keep, you know,
Keep
practice.
doing it. Well, I think that's so powerful though, because you think about, like you even said, there's a lot to do before we actually start, but you've already started by doing it,
Yeah,
right? And like,
yeah, you're right.
well, no, but I think that's that's such a powerful concept because I always like, especially on this podcast, I like to always kind of bring it back to faith and like how I think people view their faith. And you think about, I think sometimes people think, oh my gosh, like I can't recite the gospels. I can't start on my faith yet. Like I can't start a relationship with God. But the reality of it is it's like it's all these small things that lead to these bigger things. And so I'm curious for you in this progression. I'm so curious. I'm curious to use that word. How I was also the kid that always asked why and can be very overbearing. I just am like, why? But this curiosity, how did that play out in your faith? Like, how was your faith kind of built alongside your career as a volleyball player? Did you always know Jesus? How were you introduced? How did that
Mhm.
play out?
Yeah, I had probably a semi-typical like Protestant upbringing. So I had youth group in church, and but not super typical. My brother was like a great influence on me. I mean, he read me the Bible like growing up, which
Um,
I always tell people if I'm talking about this stuff. So yeah, I just remember we were in our room and he would just read me the Bible. Like I remember him reading me Acts a lot, and I really wanted to learn more. That's one of
yeah.
the more fun books. So, I mean, I had a great brother who I always followed him around and like carbon copied everything he did. So he made it easy for that way. It wasn't like he was a bad influence. So if I just followed him, like I would be following God probably. So that was really helpful. Great parents too. And then, I did the youth camps and summer camps and stuff like that. And those are really
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah, in Hume Lake in California, and then Kanakuk in Missouri. A little bit more Hume Lake, and but yeah, that stuff was really cool. And then yeah, came to faith probably around 12 years old. Like had a little more of a, I don't know, revelation of God's forgiveness. Like especially in the context or against the backdrop of like shame, which makes it
Mhm.
more beautiful. And if you're forgiven of much, or you feel like that a lot, then the forgiveness is much sweeter. So that was like kind of 12, and then um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of been a hierarchy, like a gradual type of thing. As far as the curiosity playing out in the faith alongside sports, um,
Well, actually, can I ask a question really quick on that front?
yeah,
Because you mentioned being like a perfectionist. Do you know the Enneagram?
yeah.
Are you type 1? I'm guessing.
I haven't taken it yet.
Okay, you
Yeah,
should.
officially,
Um,
but I'm probably type. But I think yeah, I think one
Type
is.
1 is a perfectionist, which I actually I have a wing perfectionist, so I totally sympathize and relate to that. Someone once told me it's like to want things to be orderly and perfect is actually it's a good desire. Like we're made in the image of a God who is perfection. So in a way that's a natural desire of ours. But putting that in the context of like an imperfect world is where it can get a little tricky. All that to say, I'm curious
Yeah.
for you with faith, like that moment at 12 years old, that revelation moment. The Bible talks about how like my ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Like basically, there's going to be some things you just don't understand about God.
Mhm.
Was it hard for you to accept Jesus, knowing that there's more you will never know? There's more like blanks in your understanding of God than there will be understanding.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. That's been a big theme of kind of counteracting the perversion of the drive to perfection. So yeah, that's definitely been that. There's way, like I said before, at the kind of the beginning, if you try and do a lot of things well, like you can't
Mhm.
do that many of them. So there's always these trade offs. And the same thing with uh with knowing God. So if you want to
Yeah.
know God a lot, then yeah, you probably have to accept that there's a lot you won't ever know, and that helps with I've been learning. That's been one of the biggest turning points in my life in the last like 2 years, and probably in my whole life. But learning that the world is so big, basically, and that there's so
Yeah.
many details, and that the questions I've always been asking about why are infinite almost, especially if you get really granular with it. So I realized I'll never get to the bottom of anything, probably. It's too vast and small, and that's kind of a submission to God's authority and
Mhm.
like hierarchy above you, with his thoughts being higher than yours. So I think that's helped me a lot to see that there's just an infinite amount of like multiplicity, as like
Yeah.
some philosopher people call it, and there's too much to order in the world. You can't just,
Yeah.
if you want to order everything, you'll become bitter probably. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's helped me a lot to realize there's just a ton of things to put your attention on, and it's much more important about how you choose that than just trying to like choose everything as if you could.
That's
Yeah,
good.
you have to choose
It
your
actually reminds me of like the book of Job,
Mhm.
when God is speaking to Job and he's like, "Were you there when I did this? And were you there when this happened? And when this happened?" And Job's like, "I wasn't." It's so humbling to think Well, one, I think it's how kind of a God that he welcomes our curiosity. You know, like he says, have childlike faith. Like he wants us to ask the questions like, well, why did this happen? And why did that happen? He invites our processing to him, right? Like he wants us to bring us that. But he also challenges us in saying, hey, honey, I told you, like, you're not going to understand it. And you weren't there when I formed the world. You weren't there when I formed you before you were born in the womb, right? Like Jeremiah 1:5 tells us. And so I love that. I'm curious, how has your relationship with God kind of evolved and grown in leaning into this gift you have of being super curious? Like, do you feel comfortable to ask God your questions? What does that kind of relationship look like?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a gift. It's also a curse. I've heard that no, I'm not saying it's like mostly a curse. I think I'd rather have it, but um, I don't know. It's kind of a great equalizer with all gifts a little bit. They all kind of have their flip side, and that's like the importance of balance between things. But I heard in the thing that really sort of skyrocketed my curiosity in the Bible and spiritual things. Especially, I was more before, but it was more of a just conviction that the Bible is true, and that the gospel is, and it has like a lot of historical and material backing, but and backing in my own personal life and people I know. But then I started to realize how I've heard it called as the supremacy of beauty over truth, and that there's so many things that could be true or not, and um, what humans actually do is they look for what's most beautiful and then they decide if it's true or not. So as opposed to just looking for what's true, and everyone does it. It might, like the truth crowd who really is all into truth, like who claim to put it on top. They still don't, but um, they just don't, because there's too many things. Like I said, there's too many things to order and to know in the world. Like there's so many things that God made and reasons for why things are happening that you have to choose where you put your focus and in what order
Yeah.
you put your focus on. So that like gives rise to hierarchy of attention, and what comes first in the hierarchy is like what's most beautiful, and then you go down. So
Mm-hmm.
go less and less. So like God's at the top of that from a truth perspective, but also more importantly from a beauty one. So I've been learning about kind of the beauty of the gospel. And oh yeah, so your question was the curiosity thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, the curiosity, how have I used that gift or what's it been done? Oh yeah, so the way I think about it a little bit, I've heard the story of Adam and Eve from Genesis, which is my volleyball knowledge, which I think it's inverted on the screen right now, and I'm also wearing this shirt. But these two trees,
Yes. Oh, wait.
basically,
Yeah.
they're basically a copy of this book that I really like called The Language of Creation. I just carbon copied his logo, except made it a little bit more volleyball-esque. I hope he's okay with that. But it's definitely common knowledge for the concepts. But the exact design I also copied, so I'm hoping to have it be a tribute to his book. But if he's like concerned, I'll change it. But these two trees on my shirt and on this thing behind me are representing like the tree of knowledge of good and evil and tree of life, um, and then volleyball sort of as a microcosm of that story. And then there's the snake surrounding it, which represents like questioning. So, and in a lot of ways, also sin. But I think Eve's curiosity was turned maybe against her in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, like, I think the whole fall of all of humanity kind of came from,
Yeah.
being too curious too soon. So there's a lot
That's
of things
good.
you can be curious about, a lot of dark things. So
That's good.
it's not always. But anyway, but then the good part is like there's a lot of good things to be curious about too, and you have to channel it that way. And it's like that hierarchy, like first look at what's most beautiful and try and understand that, and
That's good.
or however you feel good about that. Like whenever you sort of reach a level of feeling like you understand it as much as you want, then you can move down the list. So, yeah, that's been really cool. That's like I'm hoping to do that with this volley knowledge stuff, is explain that kind of worldview through volleyball.
Yeah. Well, and I think to just
Yeah.
say what's so cool about what you just said is that you're like even your logo. I mean, talk about alignment with the mission of this podcast. Like everyone has a ministry. I mean, you're teaching people about volleyball, but that you're doing ministry. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's
Mhm.
so cool. It's like people are learning about God without even realizing they're learning about God with
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
And even to your point about curiosity, I can totally relate on so many levels. And I think like what Matthew writes about, like seek first the kingdom and also follow. I mean, what you're saying, the hierarchy, it aligns. It's exactly like what Scripture
Yeah.
says.
Number
You
4.
know, it's like curiosity is a gift if you take that curiosity to God. Versus like in the garden, like Eve was entertaining curiosity with the serpent, right? And so I think it's like, where do you take your curiosity?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's so cool. And I'm curious too, there's kind of an element of surrender. Like when you were talking about,
Mm.
okay, there's going to be things I don't understand. Check. Understand that there's going to be things I don't understand, but I'm still trusting in the supremacy of God and like almost like that pre-decision. Like I'm going to commit to what's true, which is Jesus. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. You know, it's funny. I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and they were talking about how we live in this day and age, which praise God, like people are so um enamored by the fact we can have a personal relationship with the Lord, which is amazing. But some of the more traditional practices, like the creeds, for example, they're kind of the baby that was thrown out with the bathwater. It was like it was so traditional feeling. People were like, "Oh no, we don't want that. We just want feelings and all of that." And she was just saying the creeds are so important because it brings us back to truth.
Creed and Apostles' Creed and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like, or it's so important to know what you believe. And like when
Yeah.
you're going through something really hard, which I'd love to hear, like maybe talking about again, how this will parallel with sports. Cause in sports, you go through things that are hard all the time. But like when you go through things that are really hard, consulting your feelings is a really risky place to be because you don't feel great when it's hard. You don't feel confident. So,
Yeah.
what do you like when you think about kind of just that, the truth, like what you go back to in hard times that kind of navigates for you your feelings and getting through that? What is it that you go back to, and kind of what do you do in those moments that you fall back on to navigate again like a difficult moment or season?
Yeah. I guess a good example, which kind of came along with me, but I would first probably ask in a difficult situation, like, what's the most beautiful thing to do here? I used to
Hmm.
maybe ask myself what's true here and what's the lie I'm believing. Like that's a big thing with anxiety or
Yeah.
sadness or just even like losing a volleyball game. Like what's the lie here? Like the lie is that you're a bad player and you're a bad person for messing up and that you should feel guilty for the rest of the day about it. Like that's the lie.
Mhm.
The truth is that you did that was just one game and um that if you tried your best and lost, like you still had success.
Mhm.
And that's the truth. And like believe the truth. That's what I used to kind of run myself through. And it's a still version of that. But there's so many true things that happen during the game. I'm not just concerned about the truth. The reason I'm concerned about that truth is because it's the most beautiful, um, much more so than the fact that it's just true. Like it's also true that I lost the game and that
Mhm.
I made a lot of mistakes. Like that, those are very true things. So,
Mhm.
but there's a reason you don't focus on them. It's not because they're false, because they're not as beautiful as the other side, and they're not as upward aiming. And it's always good to aim up as much as you can. So
Mhm.
that's. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. I can hear you.
Sorry, something popped up on my computer, but yeah. So I guess, but then after volleyball game or a tough time, yeah, a tough time. Like the Olympics was, well, the Olympic qualification period was a huge growing experience for me. But even
Mm.
there, like I chose to say growing. I could have said it was like a hellhole of distraction and pain or something. Like, I'm not going to say that, and I wouldn't believe that because it's not beautiful. Like, I believe I grew a lot from that. So, but yeah, it was a very big growing moment, and I had a lot of like burnout in the middle of it. Honestly, like the entire second half of it, I felt pretty burnout. So I was trying to figure out why,
Mm.
and like I think I asked why a little too hard at parts of it and didn't suffer like Job. You said suffered in that story, and
Yep.
God is telling him, you didn't see me create the world, and I think I've heard Job didn't curse God. He was
Mhm.
close, but didn't, and I did. So I didn't suffer well there, and I was like asking why. But there's an innocent way of asking why, and then there's the like, why God do you hate me and make my life
Mm.
horrible kind of why. Like that's not an innocent why. So um, I would ask that kind of a question with volleyball stuff. I had some injuries. I had some stuff that I felt like I was getting worse at a horrible time. So I've always
Mm.
felt like I've been getting better and better, just kind of naturally. You just keep playing, you get better. And then I felt like I was getting worse for
Mm.
an extended period of time. And that was really hard. And I tried to work harder to counteract that, and it made it worse. And
Mm.
I thought I should be rewarded for hard work in general. It's just to reap what you sow kind of thing. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, if I'm playing bad, it's because I'm not working hard enough, so I'll work harder. And that didn't work. And then I was like really sad, felt hopeless, like kind of nihilistic, cynical. So I went all the way down there, and that was cool because I learned a lot from that. And then I guess yeah, the curiosity helped me and hurt me in that. But I learned a lot of this book I read helped me understand sort of what was going on and not understand my way out of it, but kind of accept what it means to not understand. And they actually
Mhm.
define that very clearly in like a mathematically satisfying way, which was nice for me because I like
Mm.
things to be precise, and they explained it that way. So
Yeah.
the book that this logo is based on, called The Language of Creation, really helped me put
Mm.
in context the story I was living in, and it helped me understand a lot more. So
That's
that
so
was really
cool.
cool. And that curiosity sort of helped me get me in that and out of that at the same time. So
Well, and I think even too, like back to the nature of curiosity, when we're at our low moments, it's our curiosity that makes us say, like, God, why am I here? Why am I going through this? Right? Like, we want to
yeah,
know why. Like, we want it, and maybe God's not going to give us an answer, but even then, like you mentioned, like, I didn't suffer well. But I mean, I would honestly suggest to you the alternative, which is at least you were talking to God. And like, yeah,
yeah,
it might have been being mad at him. It might have been being upset with him. But I think that like something I've learned in my own life is, and granted, I don't know that obviously the details of what you're feeling. So I'll speak for myself. When I have not suffered well, which is a lot, even the past couple of months, I've had this nerve damage stuff going on and like haven't been able
mm,
to run the way I typically like to run and work out the way I typically like to work out. It's been really difficult. And but I think back, even when I was mad, I brought it to God. You know what I mean? As opposed to, I think the opposite of great faith is not anger towards God. It's not disappointment in God. It's not even doubt in God. It's indifference to God. It's like not even caring enough to talk to him or invite him in on your pain and your anger. And I think what's so cool is like going back to what you said about that keeping the main thing, like the order of operations, what's true in the boat when the disciples were drowning and then they woke Jesus up and they were like, do you even care? It just hit me the other day. I think the reason Jesus was so ticked off was not because they woke him up. It's not because they were freaked out about the storm. It's because they questioned his character in the storm. Right. And like, I think when we
mm,
recognize, God, I'm scared right now, I'm upset right now. Suffering well looks like telling God we're angry, telling God we're irritated, but
yeah.
saying, but I know you're a good
His
God.
character,
What? Yeah.
not questioning his character. I don't think
Yeah.
I did, but yeah, there's still a way to be
And
in
I
between.
have too, right? Like that's
Yeah,
totally, I think that's the human experience, but we have such a good God. He covers that. And I kind of want to go, it's funny, like one of the last things I want to ask you about, cause I had this on my notes and then you just kind of naturally brought it up, was around burnout, because I think that that's something that's so real, whether you're a professional athlete or you're someone just working a corporate job, trying to put food on the table for your kids, or you're, I don't know, a writer or a podcast host or just a mom or a dad or whatever have you. Burnout is so real. And you just mentioned kind of like a very concentrated moment of burnout, which was like in the second set of a match in your Olympic experience. But can you kind of talk us through, have you ever been out like from an entirety standpoint, like just,
no, the burnout I was mentioning, I guess it was in many second sets, but it was also in the second half of the Olympic qualification process,
okay,
a year and a
okay.
half. So it was like a 7 month period.
Okay, so take us through that. Like, what did that feel like? And I guess looking back, what were kind of some, I kind of look at burnout as a scale. It's not like a box you check, I'm burnt out or I'm not. It's kind of like there's a severity scale, right? And it
Sure.
gets worse and worse. So I guess talking us through what were kind of some of the trail markers along the way that you could have looked at as, whoa, I think I'm about to get really burnt out. That in hindsight you
Yeah.
would mention.
Yeah. The warning signs. I mean, it's I have so many thoughts on that. Yeah. There's I mean, yeah, I felt pretty burned out for like 8, 9 months. So good trial. I know it can be longer. But I, yeah, I didn't like accept it. I guess I wanted to fight against it, and I think the natural ebbs and flows of the seasons and of your season of life, you need to accept in a certain way. And I didn't. I was kind of railing, or I don't know if that's the right word, raving or railing against God to
You can
change.
make up words on this podcast. I do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that was a big part. Is like, no, there's a series. Life is a series of feeling like you're in a homeland and then you're exiled when something
Mm.
strange, new, or bad happens. And then you are again into exile and you have to make sense of that and integrate it into your sense of homeland. So the Israelites went through that a lot. Like, I think even Jesus kind of went through that a lot. Like, he went into the desert willingly for 40 days and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So life will do that to you. And I was kind of trying to subvert the ultimate pattern, and I just made it worse. And in the Lord of the Rings, which I'm learning more about, and I'm learning much more about the powers of story to contextualize your experiences and help you understand them better than anything else can, which I think is why Jesus spoke through primarily stories,
Mhm.
and didn't upset. It is amazing that most people view Jesus as a pretty, at least a good teacher, like at minimum, um, almost across the board. There's some who, yeah, really across the board. And but Paul, like people wouldn't say that about Paul as much. He might be more. Jesus spoke through stories. Stories are harder to attack. I think they
Mm.
can exist in a hostile culture much easier than the statements that they allude to. So if you can
Mm.
say stories instead of statements, that helps
That's
you
good.
teach and remember, and they get to the core of your life. I think stories are like the most beautiful thing. Again, going back to that, so um, they are supreme as a way of your life is primarily like a story, and that's how you view it, and that's your whole consciousness is based on trying to make sense of your life and put it into the context of a story. So
Mhm.
I guess yeah, and then the Lord of the Rings, like their the dwarves mountain was like eroding and dying, and they tried to force it by like digging deeper than they should have and getting greedy,
Yeah.
to find more gold, and then they awoke like a monster. And I really
Mm.
like those images and stories because they're much more
Mm.
dramatic and they highlight what's happening in your own life. So if you're lost and your sort of homeland is dying, like you should maybe let it happen a little bit instead
Mm.
of totally fight it. So they
That's
did that,
good. That's
and
really good.
then they awoke like a giant fire monster that ultimately destroyed their mountain in a much worse way than if they had just waited it out and suffered well. So
Yeah.
that's Lord of the Rings. J.R. Tolkien, who's the author of that, and C.S. Lewis, like they made really cool allegories of fictional
Yeah,
symbols.
Narnia. That's the
Yeah,
best. I love
yeah,
that book. I think
yeah.
too what you're alluding to is a very powerful principle that I've never really thought about before, but like with burnout. I think burnout, when I look back at my life, burnout, God used it as such a pivotal season for me to kind of look at a new way of doing life. I think sometimes and not saying doing new things, but maybe doing the same thing in a different way and seeing it in a different capacity, right?
Right.
Like you're still going to be a mom to those kids, but maybe the way you see your kids or change the way you parent, that alters. You're still going to have that job, but maybe you go into that job changes. You're still going to be a beach volleyball player, but like how you go in is going to change. And I think what's so powerful about that is when you think about like protocol to kind of take into consideration when you're doing anything in life, it's letting there be room for God to change it. Because what happens is, and I won't speak for you again, I'll speak for me. I played college sports. So I played tennis and I ran track in college. And when I graduated, it was all of a sudden like, I'm no longer an athlete. And you put your identity in something. And
Yeah.
I think God in his kindness gives us burnout as a gut check, like, hey there, are you putting your identity in this thing that you feel like you're in chains for? Or is this thing a gift that you get to do? And I'm your identity. A child of God is your identity. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious for you, like with burnout specifically now, kind of getting on the other end of that. Because there's so many people listening, Miles, that maybe they're burnt out in their faith. Like the way that they commune with God is they're burnt out of that. How are you going into a similar thing? You're doing the same thing, but navigating kind of a new mindset or perspective into that thing so that it feels new or so that it feels fresh.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about your perspective. Like you said, you still kind of do the exact same material things. Um, for volleyball, like you still bump the ball. That's cool. You played college sports. College sports is like sports are life. If you listen closely enough, really, if you just live in nature, life will teach you. But sports is a urban way to live in nature. Kind of. It's
Oh,
like
I've never heard that. That's a great way to put it. That's true.
the closest you get to farming without farming, or hunting or something. But yeah, it's an accelerated way to like live many lifetimes. I think,
I love that.
compared to the like laptop warrior, which I think video. I mean,
Yeah.
it's everywhere. Even in video games, even in the technical. But anyway, yeah, you're saying so you do the material things and they're still the same, but you can do it with a different perspective. So I, I can't help but bring it back to that book I read, The Language of Creation, because they define and show like the materialist perspective that's dominated the West for a few hundred years, probably like 1700s and on, 1800s and on, especially with the Industrial Revolution. So like efficiency, productivity with video and media, it's all about retention and hooking people and data and all this stuff. And then like with volleyball and burnout, like the material things you do every day are the same, and like therefore it is the same. But there is a lot of meaning to be had in the perspective you take with doing all these material things. So I learned the importance of that. I would say, yeah, much more the importance of your perspective and how to navigate things with a fresh mindset. And it comes back like to the beauty stuff, like and it
Mhm.
comes to your identity thing with being a child of God primarily, and then something else after that, like anything else, but it's after that. But I've also learned that volleyball is a pretty pure reflection of how the ultimate identity sort of lessons are learned. So even in it's like a reflection of the ultimate cosmos, I guess, that God made, or the ultimate creation. So it's given a lot of more meaning to the sport now for me. So it's changed my perspective a lot. Like seeing all the same cosmic principles and all the stories of the Bible, like Job and the creation story and the gospel and story of Daniel. Those four, especially for me, those all seeing them play out every day when I'm practicing and living, and each day has been really cool. And that's been the biggest thing that's helped me see more meaning. Also, the kind of homeland exile, homeland exile pattern of life has given it a lot more meaning, because now I feel like I'm imagining myself as like an Israelite who's like at home, and then I get exiled, and like what happened, like where do I need to turn back to God, and like that kind of stuff. And if you can picture yourself in the context of a larger story or a more grand one,
That's good.
and it's definitely re-enchanted the world for me, which is the mission of the language of creation, and their mission is to re-enchant the world as it I think it used to be. So that's been cool. Like the volleyball world has been re-enchanted for me. Like they're trying to re-enchant the entire world. I'm hoping to, with volley knowledge, to re-enchant the volleyball world.
Yeah.
Away. So
That's so good.
yeah.
I love that. And you're starting that by leading by example, which I think is so cool. And I think about this parallel of sports. I never heard that, like sports is kind of accelerates you living a 1,000 lives, like lives in one, or whatever you said. I thought that was so good, but it's so true. And I think what sports also teaches you is, I think so many times we feel like the big moments of life, just we come and we're ready for them and we naturally just experience them. Like we live for these grand moments in life. Even with our faith, we live for these massive moments. We hear from God or feel clear of what he wants us to do, or have this like revelation moment. But just like in sports, you spend about 90%, 95% of the time in these small, mundane, boring, it's the same every day.
Not, well, I mean, to me, it's not boring. To me, now that I'm able to place it in, I agree. Yeah, in a way, it's mundane and boring, but it's, to me, like enchanted now. Like it's all big and miraculous and massive and stuff like that.
But I
So
think that's so powerful.
yeah, and it's something I want to share. But I mean, it's just like you put yourself in the context of a larger story, and now everything seems a version of something really large and important, which I think it actually is. But even like the simple, tiny stuff is, because it's like a perfect, almost perfect representation of like the large scale thing, just on like a smaller level. Like if you can get good at that, you can get good at, like it's like God saying, if you're faithful with little, he'll put you over much. So little is like sort of equalizes everything. Like I said before, with the equalizer of like different gifts, having flip sides, like that, small mundane things are just as important as the big ones. Like they literally are, because if you're not faithful in those, you'll never get the big ones.
Yeah.
And if you do get the big ones and you're not faithful in the small ones, it'll show. So it sort of makes everything just as important as everything else, even like it kind of equalizes stuff. So it enchants your entire world.
I
Even
love that.
stuff when you're doing something alone and
It's
no one.
kind of like that iceberg effect, right? Like, again, you live for, like, I feel like, again, so many people, the mindset is you live for the big moments, but it is the small, just like you're saying, that are so important. And I think we disregard or belittle the small moments. And I think that's what's so powerful about your message and like what you're living out by example with volleyball is like, it's showing up every day. Maybe when you feel like it, maybe sometimes when you don't, but that commitment, that predecision, and finding the beauty in it, being enamored by it. Like, I think to get to that point, that's such a blessing to be at, because it's the small steps that lead to the big leaps. But so many times people just want to take the big leap. They don't want to take the small step, right? And so I think that what you're doing by example is showing people, no, like there's so much beauty in the small step. And it's funny, I was talking about this the other day on another podcast about, there's a chapter in my next book called like You Who Thinks Your Story's Over. And the whole premise is like, your story can't be over when Jesus is the main character in your story. And I think what you're saying about putting yourself as part of a bigger story, we are all at the invitation to be a part of Jesus's story, which is mind blowing. But when you think about that, it makes life so beautiful.
Yeah, it does, and it plays out every second, every minute too.
Every minute. Yeah. For
like
sure.
With the beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you're just at the middle before Jesus' second coming. Like the end, like it plays itself out in its entirety, like constantly. So at different levels. So that's been really cool.
So cool. And it makes life exciting. It's like, where can I be a light today? Where am I going to see God today? Like, God delights, he rejoices in doing good to us. Hebrews tells us that. But I think like God also delights in revealing himself to us. But oftentimes we think God's going to come in like a lightning strike, but it's in the small whispers. It's in the conversations with the receptionist we weren't planning on having. You know what I mean? It's in those small things.
Yeah. They are like lightning strikes, but they are small. Yeah. It's good to be connected to nature, and you can hear a little more clearly, or you play sports.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
really,
and I think just getting connected, it's, I think about like an iPhone.
yeah.
An iPhone's very powerful, but if it's not connected to an outlet, it's not going to do very much in life. So it's like getting connected to your source. Miles, this has been such a blast. I know you got to go, but we round out with one last question, which is just, what would you say for anyone, whether they're a laptop warrior or an athlete, what is the most practical piece of advice you have for them to be able to grow their faith today?
Practical. Dang it, that's not. It used to be up my alley more. I guess just look for what's most beautiful and pursue that with all your heart.
I love that.
That's not very practical at all, but like the thing that gets you amped up the most, figure out maybe why and see if you can apply that to the rest of your life.
I think that is practical. That's an intention. Intentions are always practical, right? So I love that. Miles, thank you for being on the show. Where can people find you? Where can they stalk you? All the things. Where can they learn more about volleyball knowledge?
Yeah, I'm trying to do volley knowledge stuff. That's like a brand. I haven't really started it yet. I'm trying to build this studio that you're seeing on this. You're watching it on video, but I have Instagram at Miles Partain. It's just my name, and then there's the like at volley knowledge is the counterpart to it. But I'm hoping to glorify the volleyball world and re-enchant the volleyball world as much as I can, and in doing so, like teach it as well. But I was trying to go super practical on all the techniques, tips, and tricks, and then I decided it's not beautiful enough, and try and do the kind of Lord of the Rings of Five volleyball. So,
I love that. That's awesome. Lord of the Rings of Five volleyball. You should coin that term.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Storyify or re-enchant, I think or enchant. I don't know if it's ever been enchanted, but yeah. So
cool.
Stay tuned with that. Yeah, there's a website, volleyknowledge.io, and milespartain.com. There's email lists with those if anyone wants to hear more of this kind of a thing. But I am not the best person to learn about it. It's definitely the Symbolic World podcast or Jordan Peterson, kind of. So those two, especially the Symbolic World, is what has re-enchanted the entire world for me. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We love resources, so I'll put all these in the show notes. But Miles, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been such a delight, and can't wait till the next one.